On a quiet street in Seattle, a biology graduate student climbs an oak tree to get a closer look at a crow's nest. It is 2006. He means no harm, just curiosity. But the crows don't know that. They scream at him for several minutes, dive low over his head, peel feathers past his ear, and don't stop until he climbs back down and walks away. He never returns to that tree. Within a few weeks, he has mostly forgotten the whole incident. Years later, on a completely different street, half a city away from that oak tree, a crow he has never personally approached lands above him and starts shrieking. Then another lands. Then several more, until a small mob is circling overhead, diving close enough that he ducks. He has done nothing wrong today. He hasn't climbed a tree in a decade, and he has certainly never set foot in this neighborhood before with any crow watching. But somewhere in that flock, something is responding to a face it never even saw in person. For most of the 20th century, scientists treated facial recognition as something close to a human specialty, wired into a dedicated region of our brains and largely absent everywhere else. Animals, the thinking went, saw shapes, motion, maybe a rough blur where a face belonged. That assumption has fallen apart piece by piece over the last 20 years. It turns out the trick isn't a uniquely human circuit at all. It's a way of processing a pattern, reading the whole arrangement of eyes, brow, and beak or muzzle at once, instead of cataloguing each feature separately. And that kind of processing shows up in brains built nothing like ours. What if that crow wasn't guessing? What if, in some sense, might object here, maybe animals aren't reading faces at all? Maybe they're reading clothing, height, the particular way a person walks, and humans are simply projecting recognition onto behavior that has a far simpler explanation. In 2006, wildlife biologist John Marzluff at the University of Washington designed an experiment to settle exactly that question. His team wore identical clothes and walked identical paths around a crow colony. The only variable was a rubber mask. One mask was worn while briefly trapping wild crows for banding. The other was never worn near a single bird. Clothing stayed the same. Posture stayed the same. Roots stayed the same. Only the face changed. The crows scolded the trapping mask on sight every single time. They ignored the neutral mask completely. The face was the one variable that mattered, and the birds had clearly sorted out which face belonged to a threat. What happened next is where this becomes harder to dismiss. Crows exposed to the trapping mask kept scolding it for at least 5 years, often longer, even toward researchers who never came near them again. Some birds reacted on sight from more than 200 meters away, diving and screaming the moment the mask appeared, regardless of the season or how much time had passed, and the scolding spread to birds who had never personally seen the mask at all. Crows that learned the threat secondhand from parents, mates, and flockmates who had witnessed the original trapping themselves. Crows are far from the only animal capable of this. In 2011, Japanese researchers trained ordinary pigeons to distinguish between individual human faces in photographs, then tested them on new images, different angles, different lighting, photographs taken on different days, even faces partly obscured. The pigeons kept identifying the correct person at rates far above random chance, week after week, with no extra reward needed to keep the skill sharp. A bird with a brain the size of a fingertip was apparently storing detailed information about a specific human being. In 2017, neuroscientist Jenny Morton trained sheep to pick out celebrity faces, including Barack Obama and the actress Emma Watson, from a lineup of strangers, using nothing more than a small food reward for the correct choice. The sheep didn't just memorize a single photo. Weeks later, with no additional training, they recognize the same faces rotated to unfamiliar angles, something that requires genuine recognition rather than rote memorization of one image. And animal humans have farmed for 10,000 years. An animal used as shorthand for mindlessness turns out to be quietly holding on to memories of specific human individuals. Even honeybees can do something close to this. Bees have roughly 1 million neurons total, compared to the 86 billion in a human brain. And yet, a 2005 study by researcher Adrian Dyer found they could be trained to discriminate between individual human faces in photographs and apply that skill to new images they had never seen. Bees appear to solve the problem the same way humans do, by reading a face as one combined pattern rather than memorizing a nose or a chin in isolation. The same trick your brain uses to spot a friend across a crowded room is running, on a far smaller scale, inside an insect most people swat without thinking twice. The hardest case to explain away is what happens to that information after the original encounter ends. Crow facial memory does not stay contained to the one bird that learned it firsthand. Researchers wearing the trapping mask have been scolded in territory they had never worked before, by crows that could not possibly have witnessed the original trapping, sometimes a decade later and a mile or more from where it happened. The warning had moved sideways through a flock and downward through at least one generation, carried the way a story travels through a family. Except here, the subject of the story is a face, possibly your face, and you will likely never know it is being told. Most people move through the world assuming a kind of quiet anonymity around animals. A bird on a power line, a dog behind a fence, a flock circling overhead. None of it feels like it's keeping a record. But around crows specifically, you may already be a known quantity to individuals who have never met you in person, judged by a verdict reached before you arrived on that street and handed down by birds who weren't even there for the original event. That verdict doesn't expire when you forget the day that caused it. It outlives the encounter, outlives your memory of the encounter. And in some documented cases, it outlives the actual bird that formed it, passed down to chicks who will scold you their entire lives without ever learning why. Are you the person who once climbed a tree, or the one who leaves out bread? Has that decision already been made? Would you even recognize the moment that made it if you saw it happening right now? Or has it already happened, quietly, on a day you've long since forgotten? Somewhere above a street you walk every day, there may be a bird holding an opinion of you, an opinion it inherited from another bird, who inherited it from another, who was actually there the day your face became something worth remembering.